right, we'll get underway. The 12 o'clock session, Unlocking Opportunities. That's what it says. Exploring the synergy between AI and digital signage in the AV landscape. Now, if you want to submit questions online, you can use the app to do so. Go to the agenda, select this session, go to Q&A. You can write your questions in there if you prefer. It will pop up on the iPad in front of the moderator. If you are certified, you can get renewal units, I think, for this session as well. Just make sure you got scanned on the way in and ensure that your phones are on silent, folks. The intersection of artificial intelligence and digital signage presents a myriad of possibilities for the audiovisual community in Australia. As we step into the era of smart environments and immersive experiences, this discussion aims to delve into the transformative impact of AI on digital signage and how it reshapes the AV landscape. Now, your moderator is Country Manager for AOPEN APAC, which is an ASA Group company. Would you please welcome Cecilia So?
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with our panelists to discuss on this important topic on AI. What is AI actually? And how does that actually mean in the AV landscape? So today we're going to explore the questions and to share from each of the panelists' experience on what does it mean for the AV landscape. Please join us in the conversation when we're presenting. Thank you. Lawrence, hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Excellent. So Lawrence, coming from your background with Google, and I know your team has been talking a lot on the intelligent stores, the intelligent spaces, and can you share with the audience more, how do you define the synergy between AI and digital signage in the current AV landscape?
Thanks for the question. I want to answer it in sort of a three-part way because I think there's multiple forces at play here that are creating the synergy. First and foremost, I'm going to bring up a word that I think we all buried and closed the hatchet on, which was COVID. We are in a post-COVID world, but what COVID did for society as a whole is we uplifted everyone's ability and everyone's thought to pull out their phones when they're in physical locations, to scan QR codes, to look at contactless payment options, and even click and collect, right? It completely changed the way that we operate in a physical environment, and we uplifted everyone in society, which is pretty impactful. What that has now resulted in is we now have a whole bunch of consumers that kind of expect a little bit more. Disclaimer here as well, most of my examples will be retail focused, but obviously AV covers many different industries, so the lessons learned hopefully can be brought across. The second aspect as well is the fact that a lot of retailers have massive networks, thanks to a lot of the folks in the room and at this event today. And during the last sort of few years as well, obviously we've had a lot of turnover. There's been the quiet quitting revolution as well in terms of organizations locally in this region. And what that has meant is some expectations, I believe, from the conversations I've had with customers have changed over the last 3 years of what they want out of their digital signage network. And thirdly, the last force as well at play is the last 18 months has been filled with AI everywhere, which is why we're here today, right? And what's not often spoken about is the fact that machine learning and AI has been around for, like, these concepts are not new, right? What is new is the democratization of access to them. So then you've got all these three forces here that can then be brought together to create some pretty epic outcomes. And with digital signage, since it's front and center, it's visible, it's scalable as well. This means that there's amazing synergy to start harnessing some of the capabilities across networks.
Thank you, Lawrence. That's a very good overview of what the intelligent store is about. And you mentioned about the monocratization. Yeah, that's a very key point because at the end, whoever is implementing the solution, they need to understand the values of it, isn't it? So, Tony, coming from your experience, being in as a technology director with the LED display. So what do you think are some of the primary challenges that you have come across when integrating AI into digital signage?
Yeah, well, it's very loud. Yeah, that's a very interesting question. It's obviously coming from my part of the market, which is kind of like displays in general. we always work together with different companies. We work together with different integrators. I mean, we are not just a one-time shop where you can integrate everything. For us, AI comes at various levels. I mean, AI in the first level for us is it's more about kind of like operational cost savings in any kind of vertical market, whereby instead of having, if you have an issue, instead of having somebody needing to call a service department to get something fixed, that actually AI takes care of that. So that's one of the things. Obviously, we do see AI being integrated more and more often in our industry, especially in the multiple vertical markets, whereby we are not using AI so far as such. We're not an AI manufacturer. We're not developing AI software, but we're using AI in our technology, whereby certain applications are getting more and more important, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit later. The example I have of a very interesting app not an app, a very interesting integration we've done with a shoe manufacturer globally, but we can talk about that a little bit later.
So, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for highlighting the challenges. Yeah, that you have experienced from your industry as well. Yeah. So I think challenges, definitely there'll be challenges because it is a very new technology, and the end users are always asking, what is actually AI? Have we thought about splitting the AI into generative as well as industrial? What does it mean actually? So I'd like to get Stephen Borg from MelCX, who have developed AI solutions. Stephen, if you could share with us, how can the industry actually overcome these challenges to ensure successful deployments?
It's interesting because I guess a lot of people think when you're talking about AI, it's generative. We categorize AI into two distinct groups, and one is generative AI and passive AI. What we're talking about in the signage world is typically passive AI, where the consumer doesn't necessarily know they're interacting or engaging with AI.
Yeah.
That comes with some challenges around some ethics and data as well. But the thing that we're seeing now is there's some really robust standards that I guess the appropriate vendors are adhering to. Okay, so there's a European framework for 2030 that's been submitted to UNESCO, and you're seeing some of that being adopted. And some of the key elements in that is video never goes to the cloud, images never leave the device itself or the camera stream, and you don't actually use facial recognition ever. So these things are starting to be implemented, and we're starting to see that not only brands, but some of these retailers and QSR and government are adopting it because it's not crossing that personal information line.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen. Now, Stephen, could you expand further on, the pushbacks from business as well as the end customers? Do you see, the UX side of it, the CX, the fear?
Yeah, so I think early technologies relied on facial recognition, and earlier technologies were used primarily for loss prevention, especially in retail. So it has that connotation. But what we're seeing now is we're using AI in many different categories in retail, and especially QSR is a massive opportunity for AI. And it's achieving two things which are interesting. One, it's actually making the employees' experience easier. One of the biggest things we get asked to use AI for, ironically, is to make sure employees are safe or reduce complaints at front of house for things like delays or miscalculated order. Anger and aggression is a big problem. So using AI to reduce those things, and sometimes that does link to signage. So right now we're working with one of the world's largest QSRs, and we look at optimization to the point where if you're in a drive-through, it will give you the amount of minutes if you order package A, B, or C. But if you're going to order something out of the out of the box that we're not preparing right now, it might take 13 minutes. So that way you're setting the expectation using
Yeah.
AI to drive the signage, but also you're reducing the propensity of that person copying abuse when they get to the end of the line.
Thank you, Stephen. Thanks for sharing the overview of the challenges that the market is facing as well, and elaborating that as well with the confidence level. So coming to Tim, being in as a consultant for the AV landscape itself, Tim, we'd love to hear from you. What are some of the concrete examples of how AI is transforming digital signage in both the public and private sectors from your experience?
Yeah, thanks, Cecilia. Look, I think it's a really interesting point, and sort of going on from what others have said here today, we certainly see a lot of it is around the passive AI, and it is, as Lawrence said, going right back. That's not so new because people were using data analytics for a long time to drive digital signage as well as business intelligence, and that's often been back end, but AI is accelerating that. And so where we see really interesting examples of things like that is, say, transport facilities. So a transport facility, people are interested a little bit like those retail scenarios where how long is it going to take me to get somewhere? Is there a wait time? And that dynamic information could be pulled from the back end system. So they might already have security systems in place, camera systems in place that are, and again, it's anonymized information, which is really important for a lot, especially in a public venue, right? Like people are very nervous about, well, we don't want our patrons thinking that they're being watched, but obviously there's a level of monitoring that they need to do from a security perspective. Because that data is anonymized, it can be used to drive your signage system to tell people, well, how long is it going to take? Should I go this way? Should I go that way? Queuing times, or things like that. So that's one interesting example, which is becoming really interesting to the clients. What we also see is some of that sort of retail tracking and retail interaction in places like museums. So it's another sort of similar example of where, they want to take some of that, anonymized information that helps the patrons get a better user experience and better management of the venues and how people can move around the space. So, and that's one of the interesting things about this, that AI is allowing us to leveraging different technologies and different solutions from different parts of the market to serve other parts of the market. And, again, like in the private sector, and, this is something that's been happening for a little while, some of the data integration and AI that's been using to drive business intelligence to internal monitoring, anything from financial data through to, full process information. And we see that in finance and mining and lots of things like that, where they're using really rich data from their back-end systems, and AI is helping drive that to make it more real-time, more intelligent, more look-ahead, so they can make better strategic decisions.
That's a very great point that you pointed out, Steve, Tim, mentioning about the intelligent insights. I think we can't stress enough that with all the data that is being collected, what does it mean for business? Yeah, the benefit of it, the business value, and not only that for UX as well, the users. Tim, you mentioned earlier about the museum examples. The company the museum that is deploying it actually look into the UX side of it. Yeah, could you highlight from your experience from the consulting side, how has AI changed the way we approach the design and implementation of digital signage solutions, taking into consideration the business value as well as the UX and the CX side of it?
Yeah, I think it's, from a UX perspective, it's engagement. It's about giving people rich real-time or near real-time information that previously might not have been as up-to-date and as relevant. As Lawrence said, people are expecting really intelligent information now. They want to interact with it. They want it to be live and interactive. So, that's definitely driving a lot of changes in that regard. And I think also that, starting to move towards generative AI, where people want to have, real-time interaction that can even become more distractional or creative as opposed to just informational signage. So we are seeing that more and more. Transport facilities are another example, as well as museums, where, you know, there's a real business requirement to enhance user experience by having creative content that people can interact with. Because you know, it's another interest point. You know, in a transport facility like an airport, people want to, you know, have something to do while they're waiting for 3 hours and, you know, be calm and, you know, have a nice time. You know, it could also be, quiet spaces and things where they want to have something distractional to help people get through a stressful time. So there's lots of different things from a UX perspective that is really driving those changes, and that's really relevant to how AI is now developing and working, both passive and generative, I think.
Thank you so much, Tim. Now, Tim, could you elaborate further on when it comes to the design? You know, your consulting experience, sitting down with the end customers. What was the approach that you would actually, the framework that you will follow?
Yeah, look, I think for us it's always around understanding. You know, I think I often say this to people, that it's really easy to get, you know, excited about the technology and about the AI. We know it's a real buzz thing. We also know it's not really that new, but, you know, from a public perspective, it's a little bit newer. But what we really try and do is step back and go, well, what are the business requirements? And then that starts to talk about really important things like, you know, how do they not only need this to work for them and their patrons, but also governance, you know, and then that's a really important question. Obviously, we've touched on that, security and where does data stored and things. So, you know, there's a lot of consideration around, you know, well, if we're using data analytics and now AI, where is that information going? How is it being used? Do we need to have governance around that to ensure that we're protected as a business, that our people are protected, that our clients are also safe and, you know, the data's not being misused in some way. So that's really important. And the other key thing for us always is that it's that overall business change management. You know, where are we now? Where did we need to get to? And how do we get there? You know, that has to come first before we get buried into the technology and how the technology is going to really improve the business process or the user experience or whatever that might be, business intelligence.
So can you share with us, have you come across like one of the, what are the most critical questions that you have come across customers will ask you on the data privacy and the security, the user privacy and the data security? Yeah,
look, you know, it's certainly more and more businesses have a requirement to know where is data located, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, how is it managed? Is it localized? When it gets pushed to the cloud, what is, because as we know, like cloud is a concept, but, you know, from a more physical data perspective, it's located in various physical locations. And, you know, certainly when we deal with government and many enterprises too, they have very stringent requirements around where that data can go.
Yeah.
And then also who has access to it. And that can also be to do with the regionalisation of staff. And we all know now that larger entities, we have staff all over the world. So sometimes we get questions around, okay, you know, who's accessing this system?
Yeah.
Where are they working from? You know, which countries are they based in? So there's lots of those sorts of important questions. And, you know, that's still a bit of a challenge, I think, and really talks to some of this standardization of data security and governance.
Yeah, especially as a new technologies. And I think when it comes to the data, businesses will be, you know, thinking about, you know, the user's experience. I mean, the privacy data, is it a risk mitigation that they need to consider in the, Lawrence, you like to add in some point?
Yeah, you did see me raise my microphone.
Yes.
I just wanted to emphasize a point that Tim just made too, where I know this discussion already, we've talked about a bunch of different use cases across a myriad of different industries, across different organizations. And Tim mentioned it there a couple of minutes ago, which was, it's going to be incremental. It's more setting like the direction of the compass that we want to start to to make improvements to some sort of processes, whether they're customer facing, whether they're internal, with regards to AV, empowering it with AI, and like moving towards that as a direction. We're never going to just jump in and go and box ship AI somewhere and dump it in, right? It's going to be progressive. It's also then going to be refined over time too, but it's finding something meaningful to start with. Like the museum use case was a great one. To something meaningful for the business, meaningful for customers, that has some sort of measurable outcome, like any good hypothesis, right? An experiment, because a lot of this is experimental, not from a experimental technology point of view, experimental business impact to justify the return on that investment. So it's A/B testing. It's trying new things, and how do you go with customers on that journey? Sorry, I just want to emphasize
No, I
that.
completely agree. That's a really
very
important
interesting.
part of that. Yeah.
Very interesting point, Tim and Lawrence as well. You give the concrete information, back up with it. It seems like we're in the 1984 by George Orwell, isn't it? The big data, we're all being watched. Yeah. So if this is the case, Stephen, could you share with us more on what do you think would be the best practices to follow to protect sensitive data and maintain user integrity?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned 1984 because it's becoming so sophisticated now in that you can run on existing cameras. Right, so there's a lot of cameras out there, or latest generation sort of CCTV cameras. Often, if you have the correct certifications, you can run side by side the security stream, and if you're not taking any video off it, they'll allow you to run in that security stream. So that poses a lot of questions, and we get asked a lot of questions not only about the use cases, but about how data is treated around those use cases.
Yep.
So I'll give you an example. Some of the best use cases that we've been able to implement is where the customer is quite open, as long as the security standards are met. So for example, nothing's identifiable going past the camera itself. Some of them will have one or two core use cases, and then we'll do like an AI piece for a period of time and a data playback. And that's when you really find, because a lot of our customers come and assume what they're trying to solve, and AI will see a lot more of what's happening in a location than what a human can possibly see. And it sees complex patterns, and those patterns can solve a simple issue. So I'll give you an example. We had one client who is spending millions of dollars redesigning all their drive-throughs to save 2 minutes. Okay, so massive, I think it's about $2 million a drive-through they were spending redesigning them to save 2 minutes. And the AI actually worked out that if you increase the tap from $19, they had it set to $24, it would be an instant saving of about 4 minutes. So they were going through redesigning all their drive-throughs to Y lanes, spending all this money, and the AI just told them change one value. That's the tap amount, right? And in fact, when we changed the value, we found out the Y lanes don't work. So all the millions of dollars they spent actually created the opposite effect. So that's why I'm not naming who the customer is. So what we're finding is the AI is getting so complex and sophisticated. It's not just machine learning anymore. You're not giving it a scenario, telling it what it has to find, and getting it to look for that. That's 1984, if you get what I mean. So now you're telling it, you're giving it guardrails, you're giving it a conscious, and you're saying, hey, don't send any data that's personal. If you see a child, don't track anything, just do a bounding box. We don't even want you to mask the face. We just want a bounding box to say it's erratic movement, and of this height, we know it's a child. Don't even send data to the camera, right? So these standards are coming into place, and they're allowing us to do, I guess, this more experimental AI. And if you do that properly with the right guardrails, then businesses can get some real benefits. Yeah.
Stephen, thank you for highlighting the guardrails. It's so important, isn't it? I think for users, for us, we are all consumers, we are users as well. I think it's very important that, for businesses to consider the authenticity and giving the users confidence that your data is being protected.
And one thing we do as a practice, we submit our code and our complete structure to an independent auditor every year to go through anything and has full access to our systems, and they certify them. That allows us to improve if we've implemented anything that we don't want to, but it also gives customers confidence that it's independently audited. And I think you're going to see that more and more now.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I think thanks for highlighting on the how the framework itself, the best practices. I think that very importantly for the industries to clearly understand, are there any proper ecosystem that are in place? Yeah, examples of successful case studies where collaborative efforts have yielded impressive results. Maybe pose it to Lawrence, Stephen, and then team, if you could highlight from your experience as a consultant as well. Yeah.
Sweet. Okay. So pretty much I want to set the bar here as you're going to need help from a whole bunch of different consortium members, right? I'd think of it as a consortium delivering an outcome. From a technology perspective, everything's going to be sort of interchangeable, and picking an open ecosystem where you can interchange is going to be very important for the future as well, for future developments. So that's all API integrated open ecosystems where people are building towards the same standards. That's something to look at. But you're going to need every single deployment at the moment that is going on. I'm not going to talk to any specifically because I'll save some room for the other gentleman too. But is you've got some hardware, you've got an OS that runs on it, you've then got an application stack, which then the application stack is then calling on signals from other applications. So you have to pull together and organize ourselves in order to almost deliver the outcome for the customer here. So that's across the board. Nothing's out of the box. Nothing's just going to work in this if you go it alone. So I would highly recommend expanding your networks to some trusted advisors around the place where you think it might go. Openly share and have discussions around it. And I'm sure there's a lot of people in the industry that are willing to help point in the right direction.
Yeah, I don't want to open a can of worms. We don't have too much time. But I see right now the biggest use cases being QSR, retail, shopping center space, optimizing space. Banking and finance is a real interesting one. They're right now, our customers working with the struggling of which services are relevant to individuals and what they offer where. Yeah. And using AI to understand the types of consumers, right? Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting one as well, because and then this is going to cause confusion, but you not only have to look at the framework and how the AI is implemented, you do have to understand how the AI was created and the models that were created as well. Yeah. I'll give you an example of a large banking and finance institution wanting to understand the types of consumers, and they were working with a vendor that was helping them detect race. And this is a big no-no in the AI world, right? So we worked closely with them and said, okay, instead of detecting race, clearly that model has been created with some racial skews or bias. You can't do that. So what we helped them do is detect eyeballs of reading content in different languages, and then gave them the average skew of the language that was being read or responded to. Okay, so that way we didn't detect race, we didn't make assumptions, but we gave them a good indication of the percentage of people that read in those languages that are presented. So we're seeing different ways to approach different use cases in different customers.
Okay.
Yeah?
Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you. And Lawrence as well. I think, team, could you share with us from your consulting background, when it comes to design, how do you select the appropriate ecosystem to partner with you to collaborate on the projects itself?
Yeah, again, I think going back to what I mentioned earlier, we look at a lot of different markets and verticals to understand how things are being used. And like the example I used before, so the retail environment has some really interesting AI that's been around for a little while. Yeah. Lots of the shopping centres here in Australia are using AI-driven signage and other applications like that. Looking at how you can bring those into different verticals that have a similar use case, like the museum I mentioned before. So we try and look at where there's synergies between different markets and different verticals so that we can start thinking about, well, because again, as we know, and as Lawrence said, this is a really, rapidly progressing sort of thing that it's incremental. So we want to look at, well, how do we leverage something from a different industry, a different vertical, and use it in another scenario to help provide what they need. And then I think talking about, how we, look at implementing the different vendors. I think a really important point around all of this with AI and data and all of the integration that goes with that is that people are really interested in loosely coupled systems now. And it's all around integration services, integration platforms. And again, as the guys have said here, it's about bringing lots of different software, hardware, cloud, on-prem, edge, devices, software, vendors together into one ecosystem. That is the only way this stuff is working and developing. Like Lawrence said, there's not a single out-of-the-box solution that can do all of this stuff. So we need to be looking at all these different vendors and then how you can integrate those systems into an overall solution. And that ties into lots of things like web. And web's got a whole lot of stuff going on that's got a lot of synergies with digital signage. And, for a lot of like a lot of businesses, they want it to be seamless and basically the same user experience, the same look and feel. So there's lots of different things we look at and that we step through as part of that process to understand how does this need to come together as an ecosystem and then looking at the right vendors to bring together into that overall ecosystem.
So it still comes back to the implementation framework is so key, isn't it?
Exactly.
To have the right partners in place, understanding the whole concept, the objective of the business that we are trying to deliver as well. Yeah. Thank you so much, team. Yeah. Tony, could you share with us one practical use case? Yeah. A specific use case where AI powered digital signage has significantly improved business outcome?
Yeah, there's actually, AI is being used in many places. And in many cases, people have no clue. Like Tim mentioned already, it's kind of like, we talk about 70-80% of the things we're doing is already AI driven, not really knowing that. But one good example of where AI is being used from my point of view is that, and as Tim mentioned as well, close cooperation with the different partners being involved in creating something, in creating a vision of an end user, of a customer in the digital signage world is, one good example is, I cannot mention the name, but it's a very well-known trademark of shoes. Now, their vision was, how can we optimize, for example, our shop? People are looking at shoes, they're taking the shoes, how can we optimize that without adding people and without tracking people, because that was also a very important factor for the shop. So what we did is we worked together with a lot of other companies. We developed a complete new product. So it was just an LED screen, but let's not talk about the LED screens. Let's talk about the application. The application is that we, instead of having just LEDs in there, we had sensors being installed within the LED display. Now, what the purpose of that is that in front of the LED displays, shoes were being exposed, kind of like different shoes, one next to the other. As soon as a person took up that shoe, the ad being shown on the LED display through AI was actually showing you a video of that shoe, trying to convince the customer to actually buy the shoe. Now, when you put it back, it disappeared. Now, when you took away the shoe to buy it, at that moment of time, AI was automatically looking already into the warehousing to see whether there was another shoe available in the warehouse to be mounted on that display. And that information was being provided directly to one of the vendors inside the shop. If the shoe was not available, immediately on a global level, and that's where we come to the cloud again, because those decisions are not made by the shop itself, it's being made by the global brand. If that shoe had to be gone, at that moment of time, a new shoe had to be put in place, and the ad was automatically adapted. So that's where AI also came into the picture, without really tracking people, but really, enhancing the experience. The experience of the people being in the shop was much more personal, without infringing your personality and knowing who you were. But it came to the next level, and it really also helped the shop globally in selling more with less people in a shorter amount of time. So that's just one example where
Thank
AI.
you so much, Tony. Thank you for highlighting the business outcome of it. I think that's an amazing example how that has actually improved the warehousing, the supply chain, and also for the employee to manage the stock as well on the floor, because the service scape is such an important space as well. Thank you for highlighting that. I think from today's session, we clearly see that the innovation and the future of AI is going to stay here. Yeah. So I'd like to ask Lawrence, from your end, how will advancement in AI continue to shape the future of digital signage within the AV industry?
I actually
2 minutes.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I'm going to get super tactical real quick, just in case questions don't come up. We talked about principles earlier, and around some guidelines there. If you Google, hopefully everyone here uses Google. If you Google Google's AI principles, it comes up with a bunch that have already been up, where we've had in the public eye for quite some time. I can't remember how many years now, but it's been a year, probably years up to probably a decade. There's that aspect of it that you can then leverage and use in your own businesses. The other thing is, I actually want to pull out something that's super tactical that you could start with your customers. I'm assuming that most of the audience here is AV integrators, right? And just to talk about the second part when I opened up around the synergy between AI and AV, which was around what customers are expecting more of their network. A great way to leverage that, and this is based on a conversation I had with one of the largest retailers in New Zealand just like last month, which is they're having trouble generating content. Now, this isn't something we've discussed up here, but using generative AI in a manual sense, because it's not automated, it's not taking signals, it's not learning from the environment, it's not context aware, but having giving them the tools and training them up to be able to leverage more of their AV network, kind of manually, that you could do that in tomorrow, right? Like all the tools are there to be able to leverage as you start on this journey as well. So it's kind of like in tandem.
So Lawrence, you're highlighting the generative AI together with the industrial AI in combination of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
for
coming
marketing
from-
teams. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just would like, for Stephen Paul, if you could give us a summary, what are some of the most exciting innovation in AI and digital signage you foresee in the next few years from your experience with MailCX implementation?
I guess from the signage and touching on what Lawrence just said, we're starting to see some really interesting use cases around linking what we see to the content that's seen. And what I mean by that is, yes, you've got some basics. Like, for example, we run a lot of billboards around the country and we understand the traffic movements. So if the time of sight is very short, we might dynamically adjust the content so it's shorter and the call to action is shorter. So that's at a very basic level. Right now we're seeing, and we're doing some work with some of your counterparts in the States, and right now we're seeing embedded AI into video sequences. So I'll give you an example. Can't say who the brand is, but we're doing a bit of work where it's like I guess it's a music video that's on a billboard, and you can determine
Stephen,
that-
would you like to summarize it quickly?
Yeah, you can
because,
determine in
yeah,
that
it's
music
Q&A
video
time.
the brands that that person is wearing or holding in real time based on the audience. So it's a video sequence that's playing, but we can determine, hey, they're going to hold a Coke or a Pepsi. Whoever pays more at that time that the ad's being spun up. It's really exciting because it has other connotations as well, and it can purpose content based on the audience, but not just picking a piece of content, actually changing elements within the content.
So we definitely see that, the innovation is here to stay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because of the generative AI together with the industrial AI, it's going to bring us to another level in the AV landscape itself. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for your contribution. Now we're going to open the questions to the floor, Q&A to the floor. Anyone have any questions?
I might ask, where are the dangers? What are the areas you're avoiding? What dangers do you see coming up in the future, folks? It's very positive what you've talked about, and we're feeling very buoyant about it after your discussion. But where's the trouble?
I see currently there's some vendors that may be in regions that don't have the robust security or guardrails. And they might be providing services into regions that do. And we're seeing some issues with that, or data going back to those countries that is not appropriate for that data to go back. So I think it's some diligence that needs to be done as you're consuming the AI and in the way in which you're consuming it and who's providing it. I think there's a big risk there.
Are there enough government controls in place to be able to control that sort of thing? I mean, is that where it should come from?
I don't know if it's government controls. I think the government can't keep up with what's happening, but it's more just frameworks and industry groups getting together and adhering to those voluntary frameworks.
Yeah, I think government is. I mean, how do you define a government?
Yeah.
I mean, some companies are global. I mean, the laws which are in place over here, not the same laws which are in place in Spain or the US or South America or whatever. So I think it's pretty complicated to look at that. But I think I feel a different challenge out there and a certain, well, if I can call it that way, certain danger. I'm lucky enough to be able to travel around the world and to actually have a lot of talks with university globally, with young people, the new us, which are growing up there. And I do see that they are embracing basically the new technologies heavily, more than we did. But they're not always concerned about the dangers, and that kind of like, I think we need to do more also globally in terms of education about, what is AI, what can it bring to us, but what are the flip sides, and how well are we dealing with it, and how will you be dealing with it moving forward? And I think that's another danger and something that needs to be looked after.
Thank you. I think from Stephen, could you expand? I think currently, oh, sorry, you got a question?
Howdy, I am not a Navy integrator. I'm Jade, I'm the CIO of the National Gallery of Australia. Obviously, we're a small government agency, and they've whacked up some digital signage and said, Jade, AV and AI is yours, because they start with A and look like, you plug it in. But we're also they just released the responsible use of AI policy. So we're now an accountable officer. And some of these, even though it's passive, you're still going to have to explain to our staff and our patrons about the AI. But it is a massive ecosystem. So you've got the marketing people wanting to do something. You've got the people walking in, having a look at digital signage. I've got the sustainability component, having a look at how do I save money there, and the technologies, how do I maintain them and swap them out quickly. And I just went, I can't do all these things separately. I have to think of it as a holistic thing. I think you've kind of spoken to some of it, but where do I start? I've just gone, I've got to build a strategy of some kind.
Yeah, and I think that's that's a really good place to start is, and this is where we usually try and start when we're helping people step through that process is firstly, what are your business requirements? And you've got all those different teams. So then it's understanding, well, what are the needs of each one of those teams and looking at, how that crosses over. And I think when it comes to AI and talking about some of the risks too, a lot of it is around having that governance and that framework in place and then ensuring that people are understanding what that is. Because one of the big things that's come up that we've seen, and I think this came through actually in a Microsoft report, but there's lots of this stuff being done now, of course, that the utilisation of AI is broad-based across all age groups, but also, and whether this is in the public space or in, private enterprise, people are bringing their own AI with them. And then you need to think about, how do I manage that? It's not just our enterprise AI and signage and other things that are related to that. How do I manage my users? Bring your own AI, if you like, and what are they doing with it? And can that interact with the solutions that I have in place? So I think it's having all of those frameworks and understanding of what those things are and how they tie together and how they're managed, and understanding the governance is the place where a lot of this has to start. I'm not sure if others have got...
Yeah, and I might touch on
Stephen?
one thing that I see the most common mistake in Australia, and we provide services all over the globe, although we're originally Melbourne-based. We see that enterprise customers, especially government customers, look to GDPR as a standard. In Australia, we have a Biometric Act, which is not covered by GDPR. So actually, it doesn't cover you when you're using machine vision. So be conscious of that. Understand if you're passing any biometric information through your system, because it's not covered by that standard. And that's the single biggest mistake we see, that everyone will pull down a European standard that doesn't apply to Australia, and cross that line. And then the other thing we see is that we meet a lot of customers, and I've coined this term that free AI is expensive, because you don't know what it's doing, you don't know how it's being generated, and it's highly likely if it's free, it doesn't have the guardrails in place. So they're the two things that we see often. So what I would say to you is just ensure that no information is passing through, and then you can determine if you have to inform the public. If there's no biometrics information passing, then you might have a different lens on that, and it might require you to do less. Does that make sense?
If I can add to that, I mean, I'm from Europe, and trust me, this is not an Australian thing. I'm working globally, and it's everywhere the same.
Yep. Yeah. So there's a distinction, but GDPR is only how you store and disseminate information. It doesn't cover the biometric information you're capturing.
Stephen, thank you for highlighting that, because this is a very important part to understand about the GDPR application. Reason because I have attended a few AI seminar webinars, and a lot of them just focus talking about the GDPR. Yeah, how we need to adhere to it. And my question to them is, but that does not apply to Australia.
It does from the information you're capturing, if you're capturing personal data.
Yeah.
But if you're catching biometric data, it's not even in the scope of
application.
GDPR.
Yeah. Thank you.